Ethan Voss crouched behind a jagged rock, his small hands trembling slightly as he scanned the ruined village. The wind whispered through the broken walls and half-buried buildings, carrying the faint smell of burned metal and dust. It had been 3 days since he last found anything edible, and his stomach growled painfully. He knew he had to be careful. The planet was not kind to humans, especially children alone in the wilderness. He stepped carefully over cracked stones, his worn boots crunching softly. The sky above was dark, streaked with violet clouds that glowed faintly. It was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the distant cries of alien birds. Ethan's eyes flicked to every shadow, every movement. Danger was always near, and he had learned to trust nothing. Then, out of the corner of his eye, something small and shiny moved near a collapsed wall. Ethan froze. His heart raced, but curiosity pushed him forward. He crept closer, keeping low. There, huddled behind the rubble, was a tiny creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It had scales that shimmered like silver under the dim light, with small, delicate wings folded against its back. Its eyes were wide and golden, filled with fear. Ethan blinked. A dragon, he whispered to himself. He had read stories about dragons on old Earth archives, but seeing one here, alive and trembling, made his chest tighten. The creature's head snapped up at his voice. Its wings twitched nervously. Ethan raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. His voice barely carried in the wind, but the dragon tilted its head, studying him. There was fear, yes, but also a hint of curiosity. Ethan sank to the ground, keeping his distance. "You're alone, aren't you?" he murmured. He didn't expect an answer. Still, he could feel something in its gaze, like it understood him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of dried fruit, holding it out. The dragon's eyes flicked to the fruit and back to him. Slowly, hesitantly, it inched forward. For a long minute, they just stared at each other. Ethan thought about running away, about hiding. But he couldn't. Something about the small dragon, its fragile body and fearful eyes, made him feel a deep responsibility. He had survived here alone for years. Maybe now, he could help someone else survive. "Hey, it's okay," he whispered again. "You don't have to be afraid." The dragon's wings fluttered, and it let out a soft, almost musical chirp. Ethan smiled, a small, hopeful smile. He dropped the fruit a little closer. The dragon sniffed it, then snapped it up with a tiny mouth. Its eyes never left his face. Ethan's mind raced. He had to think fast. The dragon was small and vulnerable. The colony he had once called home had been destroyed by alien raiders years ago, and anyone would want to capture a creature like this. He needed a safe place, somewhere hidden, where he could care for it without being seen. He noticed a small hollow beneath the ruins, partially hidden by fallen beams and rubble. "Come on," he said gently. He tapped the ground with his fingers, signaling the dragon to follow. At first, it didn't move. Then, after a long pause, it scuttled toward him, tiny claws clicking against the stones. Ethan felt a rush of relief. The hollow was narrow but safe. He crawled in first, then waited for the dragon to follow. It paused at the entrance, looking back at him with what Ethan thought was trust. He nodded encouragingly. Slowly, it squeezed through and landed inside, its wings brushing the walls. Ethan sat down, keeping still, letting it get used to the new space. He watched it curl into a small ball, breathing softly. Its scales caught the faint light from above, glimmering like a living jewel. Ethan reached out slowly and touched one tiny wing. It shivered but did not pull away. His heart beat fast. He had never felt anything like this. He had rescued himself countless times, but never someone else. Hours passed as they stayed like that. Ethan talked quietly about the ruins, about the food he had scavenged, and about the stars above their hidden valley. The dragon chirped now and then, as if answering him. The connection was fragile, but it was there. When the first stars appeared in the violet sky, Ethan finally whispered, "I'll call you Luma." The dragon's golden eyes seemed to sparkle at the name. It tilted its head and chirped softly, almost like a laugh. Ethan smiled again, a real smile this time. For the first time in days, he felt hope. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or if they would be discovered. But in that moment, in the quiet of the hollow among broken walls, a human boy and a baby dragon found trust. A bond had begun, fragile but strong enough to hold. And Ethan knew one thing with certainty: he would protect Luma, no matter the cost. Ethan woke to the soft glow of bioluminescent moss creeping along the walls of the hollow. Luma was already awake, tiny golden eyes following his every movement. She stretched her wings slowly and let out a quiet chirp, almost like a greeting. Ethan smiled, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, Luma," he whispered. The dragon chirped again and nuzzled the side of his hand. He had spent the last few days gathering scraps of paper, charred wood sticks, and old markers he had found in the ruins. He wanted to teach Luma something humans valued deeply: drawing. Not just to pass the time, but to communicate, to think, to imagine. It was a risky idea, but Ethan believed in her intelligence. "Come here," he said gently, laying a torn piece of paper on the ground. He picked up a stick and drew a small circle. "This is a circle. Can you try?" Luma tilted her head and tapped the stick with a claw, knocking it over. Ethan chuckled softly. "Not quite, but that's okay. Watch me." He drew another circle, careful and slow. "Like this. Round, smooth, gentle." The dragon watched intently, her eyes wide and golden. Then she tried again, scratching tiny lines into the paper with her claws. The circle was messy, jagged, and far from perfect, but it was a start. Ethan's heart leapt. "Good job, Luma. That's amazing." He clapped softly, careful not to scare her. She chirped happily, wagging her little tail. Days passed in the hollow, filled with laughter, chirps, and scribbles. Ethan was patient. He showed Luma triangles, squares, and lines, teaching her the basics. He drew suns, moons, and mountains, pointing to the shapes as he spoke. Luma copied the shapes as best she could, sometimes getting frustrated and swatting the paper away. But she always returned, curious, persistent, and eager to learn. One evening, Ethan noticed something extraordinary. Luma had drawn a triangle that looked almost perfect. He gasped. "You did it. You really did it." The little dragon chirped and nuzzled his arm, proud of her work. Ethan laughed, picking her up and spinning gently in the air. "You're brilliant, Luma. Truly brilliant." It wasn't just the shapes. Ethan began introducing letters, simple words, and symbols. "This is sun," he said, writing the letters carefully. Luma tapped the letters, trying to trace them with her claws. Ethan held her paw gently, guiding her movements. "Yes, yes. That's it," he cheered. The dragon's golden eyes sparkled, and she chirped louder than ever, her excitement filling the hollow. At night, they would sit close together, the small fire Ethan managed to keep glowing softly, warming their tiny sanctuary. Ethan would tell stories of distant stars and human cities, of adventures humans once had across planets. Luma listened, sometimes tapping the paper with her claws as if commenting, asking questions in her own way. Ethan laughed, amazed at her intelligence and curiosity. One day, Ethan tried something bold. He wrote a simple word: home. "This means safe place," he explained. Luma watched, her little head tilted. Ethan guided her claw carefully over the letters. At first, she made random scratches, but slowly, deliberately, she traced something resembling the word. Ethan's heart pounded. "Luma, you did it. That's your first word." The dragon chirped in excitement, spinning around and fluttering her tiny wings. Ethan knelt, holding her close. "It means you understand, Luma. You know what home is." That's incredible." Tears pricked his eyes. He had never expected a human and a dragon could connect this deeply, not just through survival, but through learning and understanding. As the days went by, the bond grew stronger. Ethan taught her to draw mountains and rivers, suns and moons, and even small human figures. Luma copied everything, her confidence growing with each day. She learned to express herself not only through movements and chirps but through marks on paper. Ethan was amazed by how quickly she grasped the ideas, her intelligence and curiosity shining through. One afternoon, while Ethan rested, Luma crawled over to a paper she had been working on quietly. She tapped her claws along the lines she had drawn, then looked up at Ethan. There, on the page, were letters she had copied almost perfectly. Ethan leaned closer, and his breath caught. She had written a word by herself, friend. Ethan's eyes blurred with tears. He reached out and hugged her gently. "Luma, you really are my friend," he whispered. The little dragon chirped and nuzzled his cheek, her scales glinting in the firelight. Ethan felt something swell in his chest, a mixture of pride, awe, and deep love. He realized that even in this harsh, dangerous world, something extraordinary had grown, a bond between a human boy and a baby dragon, built on courage, patience, and trust. From that day on, teaching and learning became their life. Each day brought new drawings, new words, and deeper understanding. Luma's eyes seemed brighter, and Ethan's heart felt fuller. They had found something rare and precious, companionship that defied the dangers of the galaxy. And in the quiet of the hollow, surrounded by ruins and starlight, the human boy and the baby dragon laughed, learned, and dreamed together, building the first sparks of a story that would one day touch the hearts of many. The morning sun painted the hollow with soft gold, and Ethan sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, a pile of papers scattered around him. Luma perched beside him, wings tucked neatly against her tiny body, eyes bright and alert. Today felt different, almost electric, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Ethan picked up a piece of paper and drew a small mountain with a sun rising behind it. "This is a mountain, Luma. And that is the sun. Can you draw it?" He guided her claw carefully over the paper. Luma tried, scratching and tapping, her lines messy but improving. Ethan smiled. "Yes. You're getting better every day." He set the paper down and picked up a charred stick. "Now, I want you to try something new." He wrote slowly, deliberately, the word hope. "This means something very important, Luma. It means believing something good can happen, even if things are hard." He looked at her, and she blinked golden eyes, tilting her head as if she understood. Luma tapped her claw gently on the paper, tracing the lines awkwardly at first. Ethan's heart beat fast. "Yes, careful, yes. That's it." Her lines were jagged, imperfect, but recognizable. She looked up at him with a small chirp, her body trembling with excitement. Ethan laughed softly, feeling a warmth in his chest. Hours passed as they practiced. Ethan introduced more words, simple ones like friend, light, and home. Luma copied them slowly, her tiny claws scratching determinedly at the papers. Sometimes she got frustrated and swiped the paper away, but always returned, patient and persistent. Ethan couldn't stop watching her, amazed by her intelligence. Then, something incredible happened. Luma picked up a piece of paper and looked at it for a long moment. Ethan leaned closer. She tapped her claw along the lines, and then, she wrote it. The letters weren't perfect, but they were clear, family. Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. He had not taught her that word. Not yet. His eyes filled with tears. "Luma, you wrote it," he whispered, voice trembling. The dragon's golden eyes gleamed, and she chirped softly, tilting her head as if proud. Ethan held her close, hugging her tiny body to his chest. You you understand what family is. That's amazing, Luma. Truly amazing. He stroked her back gently. For the first time, he realized that she wasn't just learning words, she was feeling them, understanding them, connecting with them the way a human would. The moment was quiet, broken only by the soft chirps of Luma and the distant wind whistling through the ruins. Ethan sat back, looking at the papers scattered around. Words like hope, friend, and now family lay across the pages. He felt a strange mix of awe and sorrow. Awe at Luma's intelligence and heart, and sorrow for the lonely life she must have had before him. Days turned into weeks. Luma's drawings became more detailed, her words more precise. She learned to write love, safe, and even remember. Each new word was a small miracle to Ethan, a sign of the bond growing between them. He realized that in teaching her, he had also learned something profound: humans could inspire, nurture, and bring hope even in the darkest places. One evening, Ethan noticed Luma staring at a blank piece of paper with unusual focus. He watched silently, heart pounding. She picked up her claw and began to scratch, forming letters slowly and deliberately. Ethan leaned closer, and his eyes widened in shock. She had written a word he had never taught her: home. Tears sprang to his eyes. Home, he whispered, voice breaking. You know what it is. You understand what home means, Luma. The little dragon chirped softly, pressing her head against his shoulder. Ethan hugged her tight, overwhelmed by emotion. In that instant, he understood the truth: this small creature, lost and frightened, had found a connection with him, a bond that went beyond words or species. That night, they sat together in the hollow, a small fire flickering between them. Ethan traced letters carefully on scraps of paper, while Luma watched, copying and learning. But something had changed. Luma's eyes glimmered with understanding, and she began experimenting with letters, combining them in ways Ethan had never shown her. It was as if she was trying to communicate more than simple words, trying to tell him how she felt. Finally, after hours of writing and chirping, she drew one last piece of paper and pushed it toward him. Ethan picked it up slowly, holding his breath. Written in shaky but clear letters was one word: always. Ethan's tears fell freely. Always, you mean we'll always be together, he whispered. Luma chirped, nuzzling him gently. Ethan hugged her again, feeling a rush of hope, pride, and love. In that moment, he realized something extraordinary: a human's courage, patience, and care could teach more than survival. It could teach understanding, trust, and love, even to a creature from another world. Outside the hollow, the wind blew over the ruins, and the stars began to shine. Inside, a human boy and a baby dragon had reached a breakthrough that would change both of their lives forever. Words had bridged the gap between species, and in the process, they had discovered something that no danger, no alien threat, and no harsh world could take away: a true bond. And as Ethan watched Luma curl up beside him, tiny and exhausted, he knew the next part of their journey would be even greater. Together, they could face anything, and their story was just beginning. Ethan woke before dawn, the hollow still dark except for the faint glow of moss along the walls. Luma was already awake, her golden eyes wide and alert. The little dragon chirped softly, stretching her wings. Ethan smiled, but his stomach twisted with unease. Last night, he had heard distant noises, shouts, scraping metal, and low growls. Someone, or something, was coming. The colony was supposed to be abandoned. Yet, he knew that in this galaxy, nothing stayed hidden for long. Humans, aliens, scavengers, anyone with sharp eyes and bad intentions could find them. And Luma, small and defenseless, was at risk. Stay close, Ethan whispered. He packed some scraps of food and small tools he had scavenged. Luma chirped softly, nudging his hand. He crouched low and crept to the hollow entrance. Through the broken stones, he saw movement: 2 figures, humanoid but armed, moving carefully across the ruins. They had spotted signs of the hollow, small footprints, bits of paper, and tiny scratches from Luma's claws. Ethan's heart pounded. He could fight, maybe even scare them off, but they had weapons and numbers. Luma was too small to hide for long. He realized he had to make a choice. Stay and risk capture, or sacrifice safety to protect her. He glanced down at Luma, her scales shimmering faintly in the morning light. Her golden eyes looked at him, trusting, innocent. He clenched his fists. "I won't let them take you," he said, voice quiet but firm. Luma chirped, and Ethan took it as agreement. He led her deeper into the hollow, pointing to a narrow tunnel beneath the rubble. "Go, Luma. Hide here. I'll handle this." Her eyes widened in fear, and she hesitated. Ethan crouched, looking into her gaze. "I'll be right back. I promise. Just stay safe." She chirped softly, and with a small, trembling step, she crawled into the tunnel. Ethan turned back to face the intruders. They had spotted him now, advancing cautiously. Their weapons glinted in the faint light. Ethan's heart raced, but he refused to show fear. Survival had taught him patience, ingenuity, and courage. This was a moment where all of it mattered. He grabbed a few loose stones and tossed them strategically, creating noise on one side of the ruins. The intruders paused, looking toward the sound. Ethan slipped silently behind a wall, then launched another distraction, a small flare he had found weeks ago, which shot up and illuminated the hollow. The intruders cursed and split, moving toward the light. Ethan didn't wait. He darted across open ground, careful to stay in shadows, circling back toward Luma's hiding spot. But one of the intruders had caught sight of him. A sharp whistle alerted the others. Ethan's heart pounded. He ran faster, dodging debris, and grabbed a broken metal rod for defense. "Get back," he shouted, his voice fierce. The intruder advanced, swinging a weapon. Ethan ducked, rolled, and struck back with precision born from years of survival. The fight was desperate and messy, but he kept moving, buying time. Every second he could delay them was a second Luma remained safe. Suddenly, one intruder lunged, catching Ethan off guard. He stumbled, hitting the ground hard. Pain shot through his side, but he refused to cry out. Using all his strength, he kicked the intruder back, staggering to his feet. His breathing was heavy, but determination burned in his chest. He would not fail Luma, not now, not ever. Meanwhile, Luma had heard the struggle. She peeked from the tunnel, her small body tense. She wanted to help, but she was too small, too fragile. Instead, she chirped loudly, startling the intruders for a brief moment, buying Ethan extra time. That tiny act of courage gave him just enough advantage to create another diversion, sending debris crashing onto the intruder's path. Ethan stumbled back toward the hollow, blood staining his sleeve. He could hear the intruders shouting, but they were delayed. Luma crawled out of the tunnel, eyes wide with fear. Ethan knelt, holding her close. "You're safe, for now," he whispered, though his body ached and his heart still pounded. They stayed hidden until the sounds faded. Ethan pressed a hand to his side, feeling the pain but refusing to give in. Luma curled beside him, golden eyes watching him carefully. He stroked her head gently, marveling at her courage. She had helped, in her own small way, despite being scared and tiny. Ethan realized something in that moment: true courage was not about size or strength. It was about heart, determination, and the willingness to protect those you love. He had risked everything, and Luma had trusted him completely. Together, they were stronger than the dangers of the galaxy. By nightfall, they had moved deeper into the ruins, finding a safer place where they could rest. Ethan patched himself up with strips of cloth and herbs he had found, grimacing at the pain. Luma nudged his hand, chirping softly, as if reassuring him. Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest despite the wounds. "We survived today," he said quietly. "But it won't be easy." We'll need to be smarter, faster, and braver. Luma chirped in agreement, curling against his side. Ethan watched the stars appear above the ruins, faint and distant, and felt a spark of hope. The sacrifice had been painful, dangerous, and terrifying, but it had strengthened their bond. Ethan knew that whatever came next, he would face it with courage, because he was no longer alone. Luma was with him, and together, they could overcome anything. And as they settled into the hidden hollow, Ethan whispered to the little dragon, "We're a team now. Always. No matter what comes, I promise I'll protect you." Luma chirped softly, pressing her tiny head against his chest, and for the first time since their discovery, Ethan felt truly at peace. The sun rose slowly over the jagged mountains, casting golden light across the valley. Ethan and Luma emerged from their hidden hollow, stretching after the long, tense days of hiding and fighting. The ruins behind them were quiet, empty now, as if the dangers had been pushed away, at least for a moment. Ethan looked at Luma, her tiny wings fluttering, her golden eyes bright with curiosity. He smiled. They had survived together, and now it was time to move forward. Ethan had heard stories of a hidden valley far from the ruined colony, a place where dragons once lived freely, and where no human or alien intruder dared to go. It was a dangerous journey, but he had made a promise. Luma would have a safe home, a place where she could grow without fear. They traveled through forests glowing faintly in the morning light, crossed streams that shimmered with alien colors, and climbed rocky hills. Luma clung to Ethan's shoulder or ran beside him, chirping softly when she saw something interesting. Every step of the journey reminded Ethan of the fragile trust between them, and how far courage and patience could carry a human boy and a baby dragon. One afternoon, they reached the entrance to the hidden valley. A wall of jagged rock blocked the view, but Ethan found a narrow opening and squeezed through, Luma following closely. When they emerged, the valley stretched wide before them, lush, green, and untouched. Strange plants glowed softly, and in the distance, faint shapes moved among the trees. Dragons, larger than Luma, soared in the skies, their scales shining in the sun. Luma chirped excitedly, flapping her wings and spinning in circles. Ethan laughed, feeling pride swell in his chest. "This is your home," he said gently. "You belong here, Luma. You can be free." The little dragon nuzzled him, chirping again as if thanking him. Ethan spent the next days helping Luma explore the valley. She learned quickly, recognizing safe hiding spots, climbing trees, and interacting with the other dragons. Ethan even began to teach them words and drawings, just as he had with Luma. The dragons were intelligent and curious, and soon, more began trying to copy shapes and simple letters, chirping and nudging each other as they learned. It was extraordinary. Ethan realized that humans could teach, inspire, and leave a legacy, even in worlds far from Earth. His patience and courage had not only saved Luma, but had given her the tools to connect with others of her kind in a way no dragon had before. He felt pride mixed with awe. He had never imagined that a small human could make such a difference. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Ethan and Luma sat on a small hill overlooking the valley. The little dragon had drawn pictures in the dirt with her claws, representing their journey, their struggles, and their bond. At the bottom of one drawing, she had traced letters carefully, "Forever." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Forever," he whispered, stroking her head gently. "That's exactly right. No matter what happens, we'll always have each other." Luma chirped softly, pressing her head against his chest. In that moment, Ethan felt the weight of everything they had endured, the fear, the danger, the lonely nights, and he realized it had all been worth it. Word of their bond began to spread quietly among the other dragons. Soon, they would start drawing, learning, and communicating in ways they had never known. Ethan watched them with wonder, knowing he had sparked something extraordinary. He had taught courage, patience, and creativity, and in return, he had learned lessons no human school could ever teach. As the night fell, the valley glowed under starlight. Ethan lay on the soft grass, Luma curled beside him. He thought of the ruins behind them, the intruders who had tried to capture them, and the dangers they had faced. But he felt no fear now, only hope. They had survived, and they had created something lasting, something greater than either of them alone. You know, Luma, he said softly, humans aren't just survivors. We can be teachers, friends, heroes, in ways the galaxy doesn't always notice. The little dragon chirped, blinking slowly. Ethan smiled. It was true, he had been scared, he had risked everything, but courage had made all the difference. The stars shone brighter that night, reflected in Luma's golden eyes. Ethan whispered to her, one day, they'll know what humans can do. Not just fight, not just survive, but care, teach, and change the world. Luma chirped again, a tiny echo of agreement. In the heart of the hidden valley, surrounded by dragons and alien beauty, Ethan realized that his journey was just the beginning. One small boy, a tiny dragon, and their bond had already left a mark that would last for generations. And he knew, deep in his heart, that humans had the power to create hope, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. As they watched the other dragons take flight under the starlit sky, Ethan whispered once more, "We did it, Luma. We found home. And this is only the start." The baby dragon chirped, nuzzling him gently, and together, they looked at the future with courage, hope, and a promise that would last forever.